She is the ex-wife of a retired DEA agent. Her two children, along with her husband at the time, were almost executed by drug dealers. He retired from the DEA. She's here to about his withdrawal, abuse of alcohol from stress, and her life after. Welcome to the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. In the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show, we are joined by special guests talking about their experiences, the realities of investigating crimes, plus those who have experienced horrendous trauma. Police, first responders, military, and victims of crime share their stories. Hi, I'm John J. Wiley. In addition to being a broadcaster, I'm also a retired police sergeant. Be sure to check out our website, letradio.com, and also like us on Facebook. Search for the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. The Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show is brought to you in part by Colonial Metals Group. They provide help with the goal of protecting your financial future by having a self-directed IRA where you can safely store gold and silver. Assets have stood the test of time, no matter what. Call Paul and his staff at Colonial Metals Group to learn how to get started. Call 800-898-1841. 800-898-1841. That's 800-898-1841. Or go online to colonialmetalsgroup.com/LET Radio. Contacting us from Arizona, we have Susan Simmons on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Susan is the president and founder of Under the Shield, Inc. She's a leading subject matter expert in first responder stress and post-traumatic stress injury. As a nonprofit Under the Shield, she's created the only stress coach certification in the United States specifically for law enforcement, first responders, military, and their families. And as I said, she's contacting us from the very hot state of Arizona. Susan, first of all, thank you for telling your story on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. And I want to say this, thank you for your service. Even though it was your ex-husband who served, you served right along with him.
Well, thank you so much for having me on. And yes, I will agree with you. I certainly served right alongside of him, which is probably why Under the Shield is in existence.
And we're going to talk a lot about it because a lot of what, and it's not your ex-husband's story, it's really your story, but a lot of what he did, the way he handled things is how I handled things, how I handled the trauma, how I handled stress. And that was, I would love to say it was the wrong way. Some people do really well with it.
Sure.
For me, it was disastrous. I isolated, I withdrew, I drank too much alcohol, all that stuff, and that drove a huge wedge in my marriage, my first marriage.
Right. Absolutely. And you know, it's not an uncommon thing in this industry, mainly, and it's certainly not a criticism of people, because I think we fail to train law enforcement, first responders, military on how to deal with things. And then we really fail in teaching families what to look for and what role we can play in that.
Say that again, because I want to make sure the peanut gallery hears that.
We failed to train. And you know, and it's interesting because I was just having a conversation with a trooper out here the other day that for an industry that has backups for backup plans, we don't even train people in the basic academy classes about the lifestyle. We don't train the families, and we sure as heck don't train them for what they're to do after they leave this industry.
Right.
Whether it be by just getting fed up or getting injured or getting fired or whatever.
And there's a couple things. Man, I can so relate to this. And it's now my ex-wife who forced me to find a way to get better. And unfortunately, I say it unfortunately, I'm remarried, the love of my life, the best thing ever happened to me. Her name's Stephanie. I call her the boss. I met her years after retiring from police work. I spent a lot of time working on myself. The causes of all this trauma, I was so focused on that I lost sight of I need to pay attention to the consequences, who I'm harming.
Sure. And, you know, no intent. But when you don't know anything better and we haven't trained people better, you know, then the sad part is the consequences have been coming for generations in this industry. And nobody's paying attention and going, wow, maybe we ought to do a little bit more on the basic side of the academy to prepare people rather than trying to keep personal and professional separate. It's a total impossibility.
It is. And by the way, I'm probably a lot older than you. This was an issue when I was a rookie. When it was going on, Joseph Wambaugh, who wrote all those great novels, and he was LAPD.
Yes.
In his 70s and whatnot, he was talking about the psychological damage, and suicide and mental health issues were a big problem back then, and they just covered it up. They threw it under the rug. They brushed it up. They were like, we're not dealing with this. And I'll be honest with you, Susan, and I'll pose this as the question. I put it on a Facebook page, the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show Facebook page. Are agencies really serious about mental health of their officers, or is it just window dressing? It's
a check in a box. It's a check in a box. It's everywhere. I train all over this country. I've trained in Canada. I've trained in Europe. And Europe didn't quite get as much of a feel for that, but I can certainly tell you in the United States, it is a check in the box that, hey, we provide these things, and if they don't use them, that's on them. Well, the problem is what's being provided. And again, it's not a criticism of the licensed mental health world. It's the reality. I have my master's in counseling, but I chose not to be licensed. But the reality is law enforcement officers are better psychologists than any PhDs I've ever known.
You can say that again for the peanut gallery, too.
Well, and, think about it. What is psychology? The study of human behavior.
Right.
I don't know any PhDs sitting in their office whose lives depend on reading people the way law enforcement has to on every traffic stop, every DV, whatever. And so they know what to say and what not to say. And if they have to be guarded in what they're saying, then they can't really get help.
One of the pieces of advice I give anybody, and this is, I try not to be negative about it. When they say they want to go into law enforcement, I'm like, great. Here's what you need to do. You've got a general physician you see every year for a physical. You've got a dentist every year for a dental exam, and be proactive about it. Get yourself a trauma-informed therapist that knows this and see them once a year. Be proactive. If you make the department send you, you're going to wind up losing. And here's something I want to get your feedback on. Remember this. The lowest bidder gets the job. Quite often with police departments, their executive branch of government, either local, state, or federal, and it's the lowest bidder gets the job. And quite often the person you see, A, they're not qualified, and B, as much as they want to help you, they can't because they don't know it. But C, they quite often have to tell the department what you talk about. Am I wrong?
100%. 100%. And here's our whole argument. We believe in a three-tiered approach. We need peer support, we need the licensed world, and then we need what we do, the stress coaching, which we're not mandated reporters. But here's what I tell departments all the time. If people are going to be in the licensed world, if they're going to provide your officers with any type of mental wellness, then support, whatever, they need to do firearms training. They need to do quarterly ride-alongs. I did a full SWAT school when I started this company 32 years ago. I was geared up, running, gunning, climbing, shooting with them. I'm too old to do it today.
I'm not doing that now. I didn't do it then. I'm not doing it now, Susan, so my hat's off to you.
I did hostage negotiation training. I've probably done more ride-alongs in this country than some officers do in a career because I wanted to get to know the industry as something other than being a wife to it. And I think departments should require it. And my whole argument for this is, were you an athlete growing up?
No, I was not. And before high school, I was. Here's the straight truth. I thought I'd be small for most of my life. It turns out I'm a very big guy. And if I had known that, Susan, I would have gotten into high school football.
Well, to be a sports psychologist, the industry accepts that you can't just get a PhD. You have to study kinesiology and all those other words that I have no idea what they mean or even how to pronounce them. And so if our athletes need specialization, our argument is don't our tactical athletes, our first responders and our military.
Right.
And if you can't, and if you aren't willing to get out here and at least do firearms training and do ride-alongs and those kinds of things, then it tells me you don't really want to deal with this industry.
We'll take a short break. We're talking with Susan Simmons. She is from Under the Shield. Check it out, undertheshield.com. When we return, we're going to talk about her then DEA husband and 2 children almost being executed by drug dealers and more. You can find us on Facebook. Just search for the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show and be sure to click like. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. I believe in having a substantial percentage of my financial future secured with gold and silver. Contact Paul and his staff at Colonial Meadows Group to learn how to protect your financial future at Colonial Meadows Group. You can set up a safe and secure self-directed IRA where you can access your funds, your assets, no matter what. Call 800-898-1841, 800-898-1841. That's 800-898-1841, or go online at colonialmeadowsgroup.com/LET Radio.
Breakfast with Champions is the tool I use in the morning to get myself ready to face the world. There is so much negativity as you move about your day, from traffic to politics. The conversations are motivating and inspiring, and I can face the world with a positive attitude. So join us in the Breakfast with Champions rooms. Download the Clubhouse app today for free and join us soon. Online at www.thebwcinfo.com.
Return our conversation with Susan Simmons on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Susan is the president and founder of Under the Shield, Inc. Their website is undertheshield.com. She's a leading subject matter expert in first responder stress, post-traumatic stress injury, coaching, all that stuff we'll talk about a little bit. Her husband was a DEA agent, and during his career, her two children and her husband were almost executed by drug dealers. I got to tell you, and then we'll talk about his withdrawal and abuse of alcohol and stress and how that affected you and what you did about it. But I got to tell you, that is a gut punch, because of all the things in my career that I thought were bad, it never involved my children. The closest I came to was a guy that we never knew driving up our driveway, a long dead-end driveway, the end of a dead-end street, about a quarter-mile dirt driveway, and my wife at the time was freaking out because I was going through a lot of other stuff. Let's go to how you found out about this.
Well, I was a litigation paralegal at the time. We'd been married for a while. Our kids were 4 and 7, but he had a major roundup with 28 defendants, all pretty major dope dealers. And anyway, everybody in that roundup, there were 27 of the 28 got life without, and one of them got off. And he happened to run into the family at the mall at the holiday season after this trial ended, and found out a year later when they arrested someone that he actually had a 9mm and was going to execute all 3. But a police officer in that local jurisdiction saw this exchange and walked up, and everybody kind of dispersed. And it turned out that this individual had a 9mm, was going to execute all 3 of them there at the mall. But for the grace of God, that police officer walking up, and then it turned out that there were contracts on our kids for that year that we knew nothing about. And the person that was arrested could actually even tell us which kid was at which private school campus.
See, there's an unwritten rule we had, was that, and this is the unwritten rule for organized crime groups and police as well. If you have a problem with me, you take it out with me. You take it out with me. You don't involve our children. You don't involve our spouses. You don't involve the family.
100%. But these dirt bags are never off duty. And that was kind of the part that I think so many families don't understand in law enforcement. And law enforcement officers, as much as they try to protect their families, the reality of the matter is that you're always on duty, and so are these thugs and people that they don't care. They don't look at it and go, oh, he's not on duty. He's with his family. This is personal time. They don't care.
You found out about this
so
after
we had
the
to
fact?
prepare our children.
Did you find out about this after the fact, obviously?
A year later.
A year later.
I literally walked into my den to all of DEA and the local narcotics groups, and they're talking because the guy that they had arrested didn't want to go to jail, and he started spilling his guts. And he's the one who told the whole story. He could even tell you what my children were wearing at the mall a year prior.
A feeling I hate, and I suspect you're the same way, Susan. I hate this feeling of being powerless. There's nothing I can do about it. And were you overwhelmed when you heard about this, of the powerlessness that you had, that your husband at the time, your children at the time could have been shot and killed?
Actually, it made me mad.
I'm sure
and I'm kind of one of the I'm one of those people. I'm a mama bear. Both my children were natural childbirth, and you men can talk about your kidney stones all day long, but you will never appreciate natural childbirth of a 9-pound baby.
Well, I got to say this, Susan. I was 10 pounds, 8 ounces when I was born. And my younger sister, Erin, was 13 pounds, 24 inches long. And she's a fifth of 5. But I call my mother every year my birthday, and I thank her because she's the one that, I always say this, you did all the heavy, all the hard work that day. I was just along for the ride.
That's it. And so I became very proficient with a firearm because I had to be the one who really was the primary caregiver, and that's not a criticism of my now ex-husband, because his job, in law enforcement, we can't count on you. And again, it's not a criticism, it's just part of the service that families, I think, I don't think people know how to appreciate law enforcement families. Military families certainly make major sacrifices and give up their loved ones to go overseas and wherever for periods of time. My son, a Marine, served his time. But families make those ultimate sacrifices every holiday and whatever. So I had to become very proficient with a firearm. And my kids were escorted in and out of school by the local police department for that year. And I just got mad.
Yeah.
And so we put a lot of things in place to protect the kids. But then it came down to also my belief system and that God had given me these great gifts, and I had to do my part. And then I had to sit back and trust that he, too, was doing his part.
The trust thing is hard. It's really hard when...
It is.
And without getting into a deep theological bent, I realize that God will do for me what I cannot do for myself. But he or she fully expects me to do what they've given me the gifts for. And one of the gifts is lots of people. I have a hard time, Susan, and I guess it's a question for you. I have a hard time letting other people take charge when so much is on the line. Was that an issue for you?
It is, and I guess that's why I became very proficient with a firearm, because I knew I needed to be the protector of these kids. And, we put things in place at home, alarm systems and all that. And we did have to show the children pictures of this individual and basically make sure they understood this was not someone they were to be around. We put things in place at their private school as well, that they could only leave with certain people if it wasn't me or their father, and that person had to show 2 forms of ID, or they would go home with the headmaster or their teacher. So we had to put a lot of things in place, and we did. And again, we have funny stories we tell, too, of things that wasn't all that funny at the time, but looking back on it now, it was quite amusing. But, you do what you got to do versus keeping them locked in a house and making them paranoid and anxious.
Right.
We had to keep life as normal as we possibly could. I
always figured it was my job to be, and I don't like the term paranoid, it was my job to be hypervigilant, and it still is. I don't want my daughters to feel that way. And they're in their mid-30s. Sure. How old are your kids?
34 and 37.
So around the same age. And these are 2 of the best people I ever met in my life. But they are no joke. They know from what I went through and what their mothers taught them and what Stephanie's taught them, that they are to defend themselves, and they're not going to play around.
100%. But as my son, the youngest one, again, the Marine, he was 0311. And as I told him, because he's still in the area where this took place, I said the dumbest thing we ever did was naming him after his father, the DEA agent. That was pretty stupid. But, we were young and dumb back then. But as I told him, he's like, hey, Mom, I can take care of myself. And I said, son, I know. I'm the one who bought you your first AR-15. I'm the one that taught you how to shoot.
This is great.
I gave birth to you.
We're talking with Susan Simmons. She is the founder and president of Under the Shield, Inc. She's a leading subject matter expert in first responder stress, post-traumatic stress injury. She's talking about her then DEA husband and 2 children almost being executed by a drug dealer. We're going to return that conversation in a moment because here's one thing that I've had many guests on the show. We all think there's a hallmark ending where they all live happily ever after. That's not the case for most of us. And it's probably not the case for Susan, but she's making the best of it, and we'll talk about that and much more. This is Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Our sponsor, Colonial Metals Group, helped me with my goal of protecting my financial future. Being at the whim of the stock market or the current administration doesn't make me feel safe or secure, but having a self-directed IRA where I can safely store gold and silver, assets that have stood the test of time, no matter what the economy or government policies are, makes sense to me. Call Paul and his staff at Colonial Metals Group to get more information. Call 800-898-1841, 800-898-1841. That's 800-898-1841, or go online to colonialmetalsgroup.com/LET radio.
First thing in the morning on my phone, I joined the Breakfast with Champions morning show in the Clubhouse social audio app. Both are free. I can grab my coffee, no makeup, no hair to do, and connect with people live from all across the world to jumpstart my day. Join us in the Breakfast with Champions rooms in the Clubhouse social audio app.
Online at www.thebwcinfo.com.
Return our conversation with Susan Simmons on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. She is the president and founder of Under the Shield, Inc. Their website's undertheshield.com. She's a leading subject matter expert in first responder stress, post-traumatic stress injury. She has a nonprofit, Under the Shield. She creates the only stress coach certification in the United States specifically for law enforcement, first responders, military, and their families. Susan, earlier we talked about your then DEA husband who's now retired, and your two children being almost executed by a drug dealer in a shopping mall, and you found out a year later. You came home, and the DEA was there, and narcotics officers were there, and he dropped the bomb on you then, or did you find out slowly? It's like, how did that conversation go?
Oh, no, I had actually been down on the Gulf Coast teaching for the U.S. Attorney's Office there and the Law Enforcement Coordinating Committee, and I was summoned home. And I drove all the way back and walked in, and there they were, and you could look at everybody's face, and I knew something bad was wrong, and immediately was told exactly what was going on and that there was a contract on the kids and that it had been out for over a year. And I knew something had happened at the mall a year prior. We just didn't know that the person that came up and approached the family had a 9mm at the time. We suspected something, but no idea. But no, I'm one of these people. Give it to me straight, right up front, and I can deal with whatever it is. You just got to give me the facts.
Now, back then, I was detailed at DEA for about 2 years in Baltimore. I was deputized as a U.S. Marshal and part of the task force, and we investigated very dangerous, very armed, very violent Jamaican cocaine organizations. That was my specialty in police work. And
nice group, nice bunch of people.
It just happened that way. So it's like I stumbled in because of a problem in my post, and then I developed some expertise. But we didn't think of, like, I'm thinking about my partner and I from Baltimore. We flew down to Miami to try to locate the source, and we're like, oh, the DEA is going to help us out. We got the DEA office, and we had to rent a car. They're like, here's a map, here's the battery, here's the radio. If you need something, call. And by the way, don't call us unless it's paying keys. They're like, what? And we're driving around Opelika, which is a horrible neighborhood at the time. And we're thinking, nothing bad's going to happen to us. We're police. And then several years later, we heard about Kiki Camarena and what happened to him in Mexico. Oh, yes. It's no joke. Well,
that's when my ex-husband started with DEA, was right around that same time.
What they put him through, what they put his family through, and the other agents that work there is horrible. Horrible.
Yes.
And I don't want to belabor that point, but it's you think I'm sure your husband felt like he's 6 foot tall and bulletproof. You did probably too at the time. When did you realize that this was far more dangerous than you thought?
Well, I think the first realization came about that the danger was really more about the mental health of my husband at the time. And again, I was a litigation paralegal. I didn't know anything about mental wellness in this industry or anything, but realized that drinking was his coping mechanism, as it was for many. And the sad part is, in law enforcement for many years, it's always been kind of a comparison. I remember having an officer at a conference one time telling me, he goes, somebody had said they were concerned about his drinking, and he goes, what do you mean? He goes, I'm not drinking but a case of beer a night. He goes, I got friends drinking 3 times that, and I'm thinking, wow.
Right.
And So I realized it at home. So that was kind of the first problem that had to be dealt with. But I didn't have a clue who to call without jeopardizing his job.
And when
So
you say
that was
jeopardizing his job,
long hurdle.
When you say jeopardizing his job, this is something people say all the time. They're like, well, why don't you report him? And here's what I tell them. If an officer is suspended without pay, the first thing that happens is their family loses all health insurance, all income.
Yep.
And even if they're reinstated a year or two later, they've oftentimes lost their houses. They've gone into foreclosure and bankruptcy and everything else because of lack of income. That's what happens to
Absolutely.
a lot of these people. And that's why they don't get reported. That's why people don't say anything.
Absolutely. And then we realized, and then we had this episode, of course, with the kids, but we also had a situation where an agent was killed, brand new, he'd been on less than a year, and it turned out his wife found out about his death on the news. Not a DEA problem. Don't want it to sound like I'm criticizing them, but this was a media issue, as well as an issue that we're also beginning to address now with law enforcement when we train around the country about making sure you keep records up to date.
Right.
This agent it had not been too long since he and his wife had purchased a home. Records had not been updated. Well, you know, unless you all are in a small town and everybody knows where everybody's living, that's a problem. So that is really what launched Under the Shield.
That's a big problem. And I want to go to some of your story. And this involves your relationship with your husband. And it sounds like a lot of what happened to me. And for a very long time, I had this psychological thing with the soft body armor and the bulletproof vest, people call it. There's Velcro straps. Mm-hmm. And when I pulled the Velcro off, I would try to psychologically undress and transition from police J to cop to father J or husband J, whatever it was. And that worked really well until it didn't work anymore. Then I started drinking because I couldn't sleep.
Yes.
The shift work was bad enough. Then you add in the nightmares, the flashbacks, or whatever terms people want to use. Unless I could get knocked out by alcohol, I wasn't sleeping.
Sure. And a lot of it, I think, is guilt.
Yeah.
There's guilt. You know, I can remember him talking about the things that were really hard for him was where you arrest parents, because back then the meth labs were big. And I remember him coming home one time and the children were the ages of ours that were living in this meth lab. And he talked about the carcinogens in their hair and their skin. And then you're arresting these parents and these kids are crying, "Don't take my parents." But it's a horrible environment, but we also know that the foster system and the child protective services system is broken, so they're going to go into something maybe not even as good if we can't find family,
right,
you know, to take them. And so there was a lot of guilt about doing the job as well.
There was also, for me personally, there was a lot of guilt about I should be able to handle this better. I shouldn't be doing these things.
Too.
I shouldn't be sitting in a chair watching TV, not talking. Watching bloody combat movies and all kinds of other things. And my wife at the time called them mini vacations, drinking myself to passing out, all that stuff. And by the way, I'm not here to preach, but when you pour copious amount of depressant into your system, guess what happens? You're going to get depressed, and you're going to do all those things. And drinking a lot of alcohol, people will say it, but I feel happy. Yeah, because it's a depressant. It lowers your intellect first. And sometimes that's all we got left.
Sure. It's a short-term fix that really increases the bad part of it. And I ask them in class all the time, if I had a pill in my hand and I told you, hey, take this, and it's going to make you feel good for a little bit, but tomorrow you are going to feel absolutely like the world is coming to an end, would you take it? And I'll go, no, of course not. And I go, well, that's what alcohol does.
Right.
Now, the interesting part of what we see now is that we don't, I almost wish I was dealing with more alcohol addiction because that we can deal with a little bit easier. But we're actually seeing more of sex and porn addiction because first it's legal and accessible, but it gives the brain the same rush of endorphins, but they can't get a DUI, and it's a fast fix, but it's very destructive to relationships.
And really quickly before we go to break, the isolation, that had to have a profound impact on you and your relationship with your ex-husband at the time.
100%. We were running parallel lives with absolutely zero intersections. And again, he was an outstanding agent. Went very, very high in the organization before retiring. But the reality is he completely distanced himself from us, and honestly, I didn't really want to be around him when he was drinking.
Yeah.
And so it's very destructive to the family, and nobody trained me. I could be his biggest stressor or biggest stress reliever, but that's why we believe families have to be brought in early in careers to be taught about the lifestyle.
We're turning our conversation with Susan Simmons on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show in just a few moments. A lot more heading your way. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Of all the radio stations in the United States, there are no other shows like the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. And on Facebook, there's only one official page. Do a search on Facebook for the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. And be sure to like the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show Facebook page. And if you're on the Clubhouse drop-in audio chat app, be sure to look for me and follow me. My name's John, the letter J, Wiley, W-I-L-E-Y. You can also search for @LET Radio Show. That's John J. Wiley, W-I-L-E-Y, @LET Radio Show on the Clubhouse drop-in audio chat app. Let's turn our conversation with Susan Simmons on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Susan was married to a DEA agent, is now retired, and sometime in her past, her two children and her husband, now ex-husband, were almost executed by a drug dealer. We're talking about his withdrawal, his abuse of alcohol from stress, post-traumatic stress. Some people call it disorder. Some of the experts, I call it an injury. That's just me, but it comes with the territory. They're now divorced. She is the president founder of Under the Shield Inc. Website's undertheshield.com. We'll get into more of what they do in a moment. I'm sitting here thinking there's so many parallels, Susan, between your story and my story at the time. Look, there was. I tell people this. I was happily married. We had a home. I had two daughters. I was doing great. I was recently promoted in my career. Everything was going great, and I was falling apart like a wet party hat.
Yep. Yes. And I'm happy to hear you call it an injury. It is an injury. They can recover from this. It's been proven over and over. Sadly, mental health, a lot of them want to make it a disorder because that means permanent.
Right.
I'm not big on making victims out of people.
No, and I'm not big on medicating unless they need to be. Look,
exactly.
Here are certain things I have to do. And this is the big thing. I say it all the time. I used what I went through as an alibi. Here's the reason why I've got these arterial bleeds. I wasn't focusing on all the house bleeding all over the family. That I was responsible for stopping bleeding. So there's certain things I've got to do to have a better life. And I'm living proof that you can have a better life. And so are you. When you went through this and you saw your husband withdrawing, you talked about it before we went to break, you didn't want to be around him, abuse of alcohol, stress, post-traumatic stress injury, all that stuff. I always say this, Susan, my wife at the time didn't sign up for this. She signed up to be a wife. She didn't sign up to be a caretaker. Did you feel like your roles had changed?
Well, it did. And again, sadly, because no one had really taught me what my role here was, and I didn't know about what resources we could use safely. And you always heard, don't call anybody connected to the organization and that kind of stuff. And that's why when the agent was killed and his wife found out about his death on the news, immediately she and I both went, the resources are missing for families. And both of us went back and got our master's. She got it in school counseling. I got it in mental health. And with the entire goal of doing exactly what I do now, 32 years later, and that is providing what we call stress coaching by non-mandated reporters so that people can be anonymous and be free to talk about feeling suicidal or being suicidal or relationship issues. There's nothing we don't deal with because we look at the whole lifestyle.
A big part of the solution is we expect agencies, departments, whatever term you want to use, to solve the problem. And we don't look at ourselves. One of the things is that when we had really bad situations happen, we would go to a parking lot after work, drink beer, and talk about it. And it worked to a degree.
Yes.
It was a bit of a debriefing. But I say this, we need to be willing to step on people's toes and say, hey, you don't seem like you're doing all right. What's going on?
100%. And that's why we have two trainings, one that includes spouses or significant others. Sadly, I have to tell them don't bring both because we've had it happen. Never works out well for the law enforcement officer.
No, it doesn't.
And then we have one that's a supervisor training. We believe families are the first line of defense, so they have to be taught what to look for and where they can reach out. And then supervisors are the second line of defense, because how many times in your career did somebody get a DUI or commit suicide or get divorced 100 times or whatever, and everybody goes, oh, man, we saw that coming.
Yeah.
And you go, why didn't you do something? We didn't know what to do. We didn't know who to call. We thought it was normal, whatever. And so that's what we're trying to change, not changing the culture so much as providing things that the culture now feels safe, divulging those things so that we can deal with it. Because, look, all of you are crazy, but you're not mentally ill. There is a difference.
There's a big difference. And we used to have daily roll call, and part was an inspection. And when I was promoted to sergeant, I had to do this. And you would talk to the people, and you'd smell their breath. I hate to say it, but that's what we did. And then I try to talk to them at least once a week and take a few minutes to say, what's going on at home? How are you doing? And just have a conversation. And be willing to say the things that are very uncomfortable. Hey, so-and-so, you don't seem like you're doing okay. That last supervisor's complaint I had about you, you kind of lost it. What's going on? Are you all right?
Yep. And, and again, it depends on that sergeant as to whether or not the officer is going to feel comfortable telling them.
Right.
And because you and I have dealt, I'm sure, with sergeants that the first thing that comes out of the officer's mouth, they're running to the lieutenant.
Right.
And sometimes with good intentions. But we've seen them show up and actually take people's guns. And then out here, I don't know about some places, but out here, if they suspect anything that you might even remotely be suicidal, they send an email out to all employees that you're locked out of the building.
And that's something.
Now, that's not very helpful.
No, it's not helpful at all. By the way, we would say things like, and I'm just speaking from I'm old school. So, you're having marital problems, go home. Go home and deal with it. Don't go drinking tonight. Go home. And we're going to see you come back tomorrow. Those sorts of things. And we say, if you need someone to talk to, I'm here. And if we need help, here's someone I think is really good, but you do this on your own, you don't talk to the department. And by the way, if you need to speak to a lawyer before you do anything, call the F.A.A.E.T.S attorneys. Don't do anything. And it sounds ridiculous to say it, but you got to have that conversation.
Sure. Well, and the sad part to me is where I get frustrated. No, I've never been the one to carry a gun for a paycheck. I do carry a gun, but not for a paycheck. But the upper management in these agencies, they don't know what they don't know. And they're not willing to let someone come in very often who might know a little bit about this part of it. I mean, again, I lived it. I've studied it. I've been helping people for 32 years. I said, I feel like I have the cure for liver cancer, but not all cancers, but just this one little part. And departments don't know what they don't know.
Did you meet resistance from
open.
The admin staff, the command staff? You say, hey, who is this person? And they're going to do what?
Right. That's and what does she know? I actually had someone out here tell me one time that they thought that my biggest problem in getting into agencies was that my Southern accent made me sound stupid.
And people, I'm so glad you said that.
I looked and I said, underestimate me. That will be fun.
Yeah, go ahead at your own peril. Please do. And by the way, that is an old stereotype with Southern accents that's been going on since I was a kid. I was raised in Virginia.
Sure.
And it's people go crazy. And they've got like 5 doctorates, and they got a Southern drawl like, oh, they must be ignorant hillbilly.
That's it. She has all her teeth. What an amazing concept.
Crazy, isn't it?
And it is, but I think the other problem is because I'm not licensed, they can't control me, and a lot of what we are calling really managers and supervisors, not leaders, are very intimidated by strong females. I can't deal with cops. I've had cops pull guns on me in my office before because of their stress levels, and I just laugh and go, "Yeah, I've seen you on a range. You couldn't hit the side of a barn," and and they laugh. And we get through whatever's going on with them. But you have to be a strong female to do what is done here at Under the Shield. Can't be intimidated. I have too much respect for the population and love them and want to help them and their families that I can't be shy and timid in this.
No.
And upper management's a little bit, I think they're a little bit thrown off by that.
Well, we could have an entire conversation about police command staff and my lack of respect for the vast majority, the overwhelming majority of them. I want to focus, we're almost out of time, undertheshield.com. What is that and what do you do?
Okay, what we do is anonymous mental wellness stress coaching. You'll hear people say things are 100% confidential. Confidentiality is a legal term, always with 3 exceptions. So what we do is anonymous. They don't have to tell us their name. They don't have to tell us who they work for. You can call our 24-hour number, 855-889-2348, and if extension 1 is hit, you will get a stress coach. Let it ring. It's going to roll and roll, but we don't even have your phone number. That's how much we make this thing anonymous.
That's how anonymous
because people
it is.
have to.
It is. By the way, Susan, we're just about out of time. The website, again, is undertheshield.com. That's undertheshield.com. Susan, thanks so much for being a guest on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show, telling your story. Both very much appreciated.
Thank you so much for having me on, and God bless everyone out there in this industry, and thank you and your families for the sacrifices you make. You as well.
A huge thank you for listening to this episode of the podcast version of the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show, by the way, which is a nationally syndicated radio show. And we broadcast on over 115 radio stations across the United States to more than 44 million combined population. If you like our show, there's 2 simple things you can do. Go to our website, letradio.com. Add your favorites. Check it often. You can find episodes of the show right there. And the second one involves our Facebook page. It's so easy to find great content, including past episodes of the show. And when you see something that you like, that resonates with you, be sure to share it with your friends. We'll be back in just a few days with another episode of the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show and Podcast. Until then, this is John J. Wiley. See ya.